There is a peculiar feeling that visits us in certain unguarded moments, in the space between sleeping and waking, in the aftermath of dreams we cannot quite remember, in those strange twilight hours when the familiar geometry of our lives seems suddenly arbitrary, suddenly thin. It is the feeling that something is not quite right, not in the neurotic sense, not in the anxious modern sense of impending doom or personal inadequacy, but something far older and far stranger. It is the sense that the world we have been presented with, the world we navigate with such confident automaticity, is not the whole story. That behind the facade of the ordinary, behind the reassuring solidity of matter and the reliable progression of cause and effect, there exists something else, something that is simultaneously watching and hiding, something that is, in some impossible way, both the audience and the performer, both the question and the answer, both the seeker and that which is sought. This is not a new intuition. It has haunted human consciousness since the very beginning of what we might call human consciousness. The shamans of the Upper Paleolithic knew it. The mystery cults of ancient Greece built entire civilizations of inner meaning around it. The alchemists of medieval Europe encoded it in their strange symbolic languages. The mystics of every tradition have pointed toward it, each in their own idiom, each with their own map of the territory. And yet, despite this vast accumulation of testimony, despite the overwhelming weight of human experience suggesting that consensus reality is a kind of local ordinance rather than a universal law, we persist in our collective conviction that what we see is what there is, that the visible world exhausts the possibilities of the real, that if something cannot be weighed, measured, photographed, and replicated in laboratory conditions, it does not, in any meaningful sense, exist. This is perhaps the strangest thing about our current situation. Not that the universe hides its true face, that much seems almost self-evident once you begin to pay attention, but that we have become so profoundly committed to not noticing this concealment. We have built an entire civilization on the premise that the surface is the depth, that appearance is essence, that the map is the territory. And the more sophisticated our civilization becomes, the more elaborate our instruments of measurement, the more detailed our maps of the physical world, the more completely we seem to forget that there might be anything to map beyond the physical. We have achieved an unprecedented mastery over the manipulation of matter and energy, and in the process, we have somehow convinced ourselves that matter and energy are all there is. It is as if, having invented ever more powerful flashlights, we have forgotten that the darkness still surrounds us on all sides, patient and infinite, waiting for the batteries to run down. But what would it mean to say that the universe hides its true face? Let us approach this question carefully, because it is easy to slip into the kind of vague, mystical hand-waving that makes these ideas easy to dismiss. We are not talking about a simple conspiracy, as if there were some cosmic bureaucracy carefully managing our perceptions, filing away the forbidden experiences, stamping certain realities with classified status. The concealment is at once more subtle and more radical than that. It is built into the very structure of things. It is not an accident or an oversight, but a feature of the system. The universe, whatever the universe ultimately is, seems to have designed itself in such a way that its deepest nature is not immediately apparent. It has wrapped itself in veils upon veils, each veil revealing another veil beneath it, each apparent depth concealing a further depth, each answer generating new questions. And this is not a flaw in our instruments of perception or a limitation of our cognitive architecture, though those factors certainly play a role. It is something more fundamental. It is as if the universe wanted to hide, as if hiding were part of what it does, part of what it is, part of the game it is playing with itself. Consider the peculiar phenomenon of ordinary consciousness. Here you are, reading these words, processing these ideas, existing as some kind of aware presence in what appears to be a physical body, located in what appears to be a three-dimensional space, moving through what appears to be linear time. This seems so natural, so self-evident, so utterly unremarkable, that it barely registers as a phenomenon at all. And yet, if you pause for a moment and actually look at what is happening, actually attend to the immediate fact of your own existence, something very strange begins to emerge. What is this awareness? Where does it come from? How does the meat of the brain, the firing of neurons, the electrochemical cascade of biological processes, give rise to the felt quality of experience, to the redness of red and the painfulness of pain, to the simple but irreducible fact that there is something it is like to be you? Science has no answer to this question, not a preliminary answer, not a partial answer, not even a promising avenue of research. The so-called hard problem of consciousness remains exactly where it has always been, at the very foundation of our existence, mocking our confident materialism, reminding us that the most familiar fact of our lives is simultaneously the most mysterious. And here is where the concealment begins to reveal its true depth. Because it is not merely that consciousness is mysterious, it is that we have somehow managed to forget that it is mysterious. We have become so accustomed to the magic trick of awareness that we no longer see it as a magic trick at all. We wake up each morning into the fact of our own existence, into this impossible theatre of sensation and thought and memory and anticipation, and we treat it as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. We barely give it a second thought. We are too busy with the 10,000 things, too occupied with the endless demands and distractions of modern life, too thoroughly hypnotized by the consensus hallucination to notice that the consensus hallucination is, in fact, a hallucination. The universe has hidden its true face so effectively that most of us don't even realize there is a face to be hidden. We have mistaken the mask for the reality and the reality for nothing at all. But the mask is beginning to slip. This is perhaps the most significant development of our time, more significant than the digital revolution, or the climate crisis, or the geopolitical rearrangements that occupy so much of our collective attention. The mask is beginning to slip, and what is emerging from behind it is not what we expected. It is not a void, not a meaningless chaos, not the existential horror that modern philosophy has so often threatened us with. It is something far stranger and, in the final analysis, far more beautiful. It is the recognition that the universe is not the dead mechanism we have been trained to see, but a living presence, an intelligent something, a vast and playful consciousness that has been here all along, hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to develop the eyes to see it. The psychedelic experience has been, for millions of people across cultures and throughout history, the most direct and unmistakable evidence of this concealment. Not because psychedelics create hallucinations, that dismissive interpretation misses the point entirely, but because psychedelics temporarily disrupt the cognitive filters that normally constrain our perception to the narrow bandwidth of consensus reality. They pull back the curtain, if only for a few hours, and reveal the stagecraft behind the production. And what people consistently report when the curtain is pulled back is not chaos, or meaninglessness, or random neural noise. What they report is contact. Contact with something that feels more real than ordinary reality, something that has been there all along, something that seems to recognize them even as they recognize it. They report the distinct impression that they have woken up from a dream they didn't know they were having, that the world they thought was real was actually a kind of elaborate construction, a simplified user interface designed to help them navigate a reality far too complex and multidimensional to be perceived directly. This is not a metaphor, or rather, it is a metaphor, but it is a metaphor that points towards something actual. The universe really does seem to hide its true face, and the evidence for this hiding is overwhelming if you know where to look. It is there in the testimony of mystics and shamans across cultures and throughout time. It is there in the strange phenomena that lurk at the edges of accepted science, the near-death experiences, the verified cases of reincarnation memories, the laboratory studies of feci phenomena that consistently produce small but statistically significant effects that materialist science cannot explain and therefore chooses to ignore. It is there in the fundamental weirdness of quantum mechanics, where particles seem to exist in superposition until observed, where the act of measurement appears to collapse probability waves into definite outcomes, where the universe seems to be telling us, in the precise language of mathematics, that consciousness and reality are far more entangled than our common sense would suggest. The question is not whether the universe hides. The question is why. What possible purpose could such an elaborate concealment serve? Why would the cosmos go to such trouble to disguise itself, to create beings capable of questioning reality, and then make reality so difficult to see clearly? This is the question that haunts the edges of human inquiry, the question that cannot be asked within the framework of conventional science, because conventional science has already assumed its answer, that there is no purpose, that the universe is not the kind of thing that has purposes, that questions about ultimate meaning are not proper scientific questions and should be left to poets and philosophers and other purveyors of pleasant illusion. But this assumption is precisely what is now being challenged not by wishful thinking or religious dogma, but by the deepening mystery that emerges as our instruments grow more sensitive and our questions grow more subtle. Something is going on here. Something is definitely going on. And the fact that we cannot quite say what it is, that it seems to slip away every time we try to pin it down, is itself part of the phenomenon. The universe is playing a game with us, or perhaps through us, and the rules of the game seem to include the rule that the game must remain hidden until we develop the capacity to see it. We are like children in an enormously sophisticated virtual reality simulation, so immersed in the experience that we have forgotten we are wearing headsets, so convinced by the graphics that we have lost touch with the wider reality in which the simulation is running. And somewhere, in some dimension or mode of being that we cannot quite access from within the simulation, something is watching our progress with what we can only imagine is a kind of cosmic amusement, waiting for the moment when we will finally look up, finally notice the pixels, finally realize that we have been playing a game all along. This realization, when it comes, changes everything. Not because the game stops, the game continues exactly as before, with its suffering and its joy, its birth and death, its endless becoming, but because the relationship to the game transforms. We are no longer lost in it. We are no longer convinced by the special effects. We know, in some deep and inarguable way, that what we took to be absolute reality is actually a relative phenomenon, a local production, a temporary arrangement of consciousness playing dress-up in the costumes of space and time. And this knowing, far from diminishing the value of experience, actually increases it. Because now we are playing consciously. Now we are participating in the cosmic hide-and-seek with full awareness of what we are doing. Now we have become, in some small but significant way, partners with whatever it is that is doing the hiding. The mechanisms by which the universe conceals its true face are numerous and ingenious, woven so thoroughly into the fabric of ordinary existence that we rarely pause to examine them. The first, and perhaps most fundamental of these mechanisms, is language itself. That strange symbolic technology that distinguishes human consciousness from other modes of being and simultaneously traps us within its particular grammar of reality. We do not usually think of language as a filter, as a limiting device. We think of it as a tool for communication, for the transmission of ideas from one mind to another, for the coordination of collective action. And it is all of these things. But it is also something else, something more subtle and more consequential. Language is the operating system of consensus reality. It is the program that runs in the background of human consciousness, structuring our perception, channeling our attention, determining in advance what kinds of experiences are permissible and what kinds are automatically screened out. Consider how this works in practice. Long before you learned to speak, before you had any words for the phenomena flooding through your infant awareness, you were having experiences that were not yet organized by language. You were perceiving the world directly, without the mediation of concepts, without the labels and categories that would later come to seem so natural and necessary. You saw colors that had no names, heard sounds that had not yet been sorted into music and noise, felt sensations that simply were what they were, immediate and indescribable. And then, gradually, painfully, wonderfully, you were initiated into language. You learned that certain sounds corresponded to certain objects, that reality could be carved up into nouns and verbs, that some things were important enough to name, and others were background noise beneath the dignity of linguistic recognition. This was not a neutral process. This was a kind of trance induction. You were being programmed, in the most literal sense, to see the world in a particular way, to emphasize certain features and ignore others, to perceive a reality that was as much a cultural construction as it was an objective given. And here is the crucial point. You do not remember this programming. The installation of the linguistic operating system happens before the formation of continuous autobiographical memory. By the time you become capable of reflecting on your own consciousness, the filters are already in place. The limiting assumptions have already been internalized. The consensus hallucination has already become, for all practical purposes, simply what reality is. You cannot step back from language to see what lies before it, because stepping back itself is a linguistic operation, because reflection itself is already caught up in the symbolic game. The trap is elegant, almost perfect. The universe has hidden itself behind a veil that becomes invisible the moment you put it on. This is why ordinary consciousness is so remarkable in its limitations. It is not that human beings are inherently incapable of perceiving deeper realities. It is that we have been trained, from the earliest moments of our development, to not perceive them. The training is so thorough, so pervasive, so reinforced by every social interaction and cultural institution, that we come to believe it is simply the nature of mind. We come to believe that the narrow bandwidth of consensus reality is all there is, that the walls of the linguistic prison are the boundaries of the possible, and most people live their entire lives within these walls, never suspecting that they are in a prison at all, never imagining that the door has been open the whole time, waiting for them to walk through. But language is only the first layer of the concealment. Beyond language lies culture, that vast complex of shared assumptions, unexamined beliefs, taken for granted values, and implicit agreements about the nature of reality that we inherit simply by being born into a particular time and place. Culture is to the collective what language is to the individual, an operating system that structures perception and determines in advance what kinds of experiences are possible. And just as we do not choose our native language, we do not choose our native culture. It is given to us, imposed upon us, absorbed through countless subtle and not so subtle interactions, until it becomes, quite literally, the lens through which we see everything else. We become cultural beings before we become conscious beings. By the time we develop the capacity for critical reflection, we are already so thoroughly enculturated that the culture feels like nature, feels like the way things simply are, feels like reality itself, rather than one possible interpretation of reality among many. The function of culture, from the perspective of the individual, is to provide a coherent framework for making sense of experience. It answers, before we even think to ask, the fundamental questions that would otherwise arise spontaneously from human consciousness. What is the world? What am I? What is my place in the larger scheme of things? What should I do with my time? What happens when I die? These are not trivial questions. They are the deepest questions that a conscious being can ask. And culture provides ready-made answers, packages of meaning that we can adopt wholesale, without having to do the difficult work of investigating reality for ourselves. This is, in some sense, a necessary service. Life is short and complex, and we cannot investigate everything from first principles. We rely on accumulated wisdom, on the discoveries and conclusions of those who came before us. But this reliance comes at a cost. The cost is that we inherit not only wisdom, but also blindness, not only insight, but also the specific forms of ignorance that each culture cultivates alongside its knowledge. Our particular culture, the culture of modern Western technological civilization, has developed an especially sophisticated and especially limiting framework for understanding reality. We have constructed something that has never existed before in human history. A worldview that explicitly denies the existence of meaning, purpose, and consciousness as fundamental features of the cosmos. We call this worldview scientific materialism, and we have convinced ourselves that it is not a worldview at all, but simply a description of the way things are. This conviction is itself a remarkable achievement of cultural programming. It took centuries to install, required the systematic dismantling of earlier frameworks of meaning, and has now become so pervasive that most educated people cannot even imagine an alternative. They hear the word spiritual and immediately translate it into irrational. They hear the word mystical and immediately think deluded. They have been trained to associate the exploration of consciousness with pathology, to view altered states as aberrations rather than potentially valid modes of perception, to dismiss the testimony of countless generations of human beings as nothing more than the ignorant superstitions of pre-scientific peoples. This is the second layer of the concealment, and it is in some ways more effective than the first. Language merely structures perception. Culture determines what kinds of perceptions are permissible. In our culture, the deeper perceptions, the experiences that suggest reality is stranger, richer, more alive and intelligent than the materialist framework allows, are systematically delegitimized. If you have a mystical experience, if you encounter something that doesn't fit within the accepted categories, you learn very quickly to keep quiet about it. You learn that such experiences mark you as unstable, as credulous, as someone who has failed to properly internalize the cultural operating system. And so the feedback loop closes. The culture denies the validity of certain experiences, and this denial ensures that people who have those experiences will not speak of them, which confirms the cultural assumption that such experiences are rare or non-existent, which further strengthens the denial. The universe hides in part because we have agreed to help it hide. We have become active participants in our own limiting, collaborators in the grand project of keeping ourselves asleep. But the mechanisms of concealment go deeper still. Beyond language, beyond culture, there is something that might be called the structure of space-time itself, the fundamental architecture of the cosmos as we perceive it. And here we encounter a truly remarkable situation. Because physics, that most respectable of sciences, that bastion of materialist orthodoxy, has been telling us for more than a century that space-time is not what it appears to be. Relativity showed that space and time are not fixed backgrounds against which events unfold, but dynamic participants in the cosmic dance, curved and shaped by the presence of matter and energy. Quantum mechanics showed that at the smallest scales, reality behaves in ways that violate our most basic intuitions about how things should work. Particles existing in superposition, entangled across space, behaving differently depending on whether they are observed. And yet, despite these revolutionary discoveries, we continue to perceive a world of solid objects existing in three-dimensional space, moving through linear time, obeying the comfortable laws of classical physics. How is this possible? How can our lived experience be so out of step with our best scientific understanding of nature? The answer, or at least an important part of the answer, is that perception is not a passive reception of information from the environment. Perception is an active construction, a model-building process, a kind of controlled hallucination that has been shaped by millions of years of evolution to serve the needs of survival rather than the pursuit of truth. Your brain is not a window onto reality. It is a virtual reality headset, generating a simulation of the world that is useful for finding food, avoiding predators, and reproducing successfully. This simulation is extraordinarily effective for those purposes, so effective that we have dominated the planet, transformed ecosystems, and escaped the immediate pressures of natural selection. But effectiveness is not the same as accuracy. A useful map is not necessarily a true map, and the map that evolution has installed in human consciousness is specifically designed to hide from us anything that is not immediately relevant to the concerns of biological survival. This explains why the universe can hide in plain sight. The concealment is built into the very architecture of perception. Our brains are pattern recognition machines optimized for a very narrow band of phenomena. Objects at the scale of meters, movements at the speed of walking or running, changes occurring over seconds and minutes and hours. Everything outside this narrow band is invisible to us, not because it doesn't exist, but because our perceptual apparatus is not designed to register it. The quantum weirdness at the base of reality is hidden because we are too large and too slow to perceive it directly. The vast structures of cosmic time and cosmic space are hidden because we are too small and too brief to apprehend them without the aid of instruments. We live in a bubble of accessibility, a narrow slice of the possible, and we have mistaken this slice for the totality of what is. But even this does not capture the full depth of the concealment, because it is not merely that our perceptions are limited. Every organism's perceptions are limited in some way. It is that our perceptions seem specifically designed to hide the most fundamental feature of reality. That consciousness is not produced by the brain, but is in some sense primary. That mind and world are not separate, but are aspects of a single underlying reality. That the universe is not dead matter, blindly shuffling through time, but something more like a dream being dreamed by a dreamer that includes us as part of its dreaming. These ideas are not speculative fantasy. They are taking on increasing plausibility as the failures of the materialist paradigm become more and more apparent. The hard problem of consciousness does not yield to the explanatory framework of neuroscience. The mysteries of quantum mechanics do not resolve into comfortable classical certainties. The fine-tuning of the physical constants, the emergence of life, the evolution of intelligence, these phenomena cry out for explanation, and the explanations offered by mainstream science become increasingly strained and implausible as the problems become clearer. Something else is going on, and the something else seems to be deliberately hidden, encoded in such a way that only a certain kind of attention, a certain quality of consciousness, can decode it. The ancients knew this. The mystery traditions of every culture taught that deeper reality was available only to those who had been properly prepared, properly initiated, properly transformed by the practices and ordeals that opened the inner eye. This was not elitism in the ordinary sense. It was not about keeping secrets from the unworthy. It was about recognizing that the concealment is not an external obstacle, but an internal one. That what hides the true face of the universe is not a cosmic conspiracy, but our own unexamined minds, our own habitual patterns of perception, our own deep investment in the consensus hallucination that we call ordinary life. The universe, in other words, hides behind ourselves. We are the veil that conceals the mystery, and this means that the unveiling, when it comes, cannot be achieved by external means alone, not by building better telescopes or microscopes, not by developing more powerful theories or more subtle instruments. These approaches are valuable. They have their place in the larger project of understanding. But the essential movement is internal. It is a turning of attention, a shift in the relationship between observer and observed, a willingness to question assumptions that we didn't know we were making. The universe is waiting to be seen. It has been waiting, patiently, eternally, for consciousness to develop the capacity to recognize itself, to see through the elaborate games of hide and seek that constitute the phenomenal world. And the incredible thing, the thing that should fill us with awe and gratitude and a kind of cosmic delight, is that the moment of recognition seems to be approaching. What lies behind the veil? What would we see if the mechanisms of concealment were suddenly stripped away, if the linguistic filters dissolved, if the cultural programming released its grip, if perception expanded beyond the narrow bandwidth of biological survival? These are not idle questions. They are questions that have been answered again and again by human beings who have found their way through the barriers, whether through the ancient technologies of meditation and contemplation, through the shamanic practices of traditional cultures, through spontaneous mystical experiences that arrive unbidden and uninvited, or through the judicious use of psychoactive substances that temporarily disable the reducing valve of ordinary consciousness. The testimony of these travelers is remarkably consistent across cultures and across centuries, and it points towards something that our scientific worldview is not equipped to accommodate. The first thing the travelers report is an overwhelming sense of reality. This seems paradoxical to those who have not had the experience. If what lies behind the veil is more real, then shouldn't what lies in front of it feel correspondingly less real? But that is not how it works. When the veil parts, when perception expands, when the hidden face of the universe begins to emerge from behind the mask of the ordinary, the most immediate and unmistakable impression is not one of unreality, but of hyperreality, of finally waking up into an intensity of existence that makes ordinary consciousness seem like a faded photograph of life rather than life itself. The colors are more vivid, the edges sharper, the presence of each moment more completely and undeniably itself. It is as if you had been watching a movie your whole life and suddenly found yourself standing in the landscape that the movie was depicting, breathing the actual air, feeling the actual sun, realizing with a shock that the two-dimensional representation you had taken for reality was only ever a pale imitation of the thing itself. This quality of heightened reality is important because it undermines the standard dismissal of non-ordinary experiences as hallucinations. A hallucination, in the medical sense, is a perception of something that is not there, a malfunction, an error, a fabrication of the brain. But the experiences we are describing do not feel like errors. They feel like corrections. They feel like the removal of a distortion rather than the introduction of one. The travelers consistently report that they are not leaving reality behind, but penetrating more deeply into it, not escaping from the world, but finally arriving at it, not losing their minds, but coming to their senses in a way that ordinary consciousness makes impossible. This subjective impression of reality, of ontological weight, of genuine contact with something that exists independently of the perceiver, is itself a phenomenon that demands explanation. Why should non-ordinary states produce this quality of enhanced reality rather than the diminished, dreamlike quality we would expect if they were merely distortions of normal function? The answer suggested by the testimony of travelers is that ordinary consciousness is itself the distortion, that what we take to be waking reality is actually a kind of contracted, reduced, narrowed version of a much larger reality that is hidden from us by the very efficiency of our cognitive filters. The brain is not a producer of consciousness, but a reducer of it, a kind of valve or filter that takes the infinite information stream of the cosmos and reduces it to the trickle that we call everyday experience. This reduction is necessary for biological survival. We would be paralyzed by the full intensity of unfiltered reality, unable to focus on the practical tasks that keep us alive. But the reduction comes at a cost. We lose access to the very things that make life meaningful, to the sense of participation in something larger than ourselves, to the direct perception of the sacred that underlies all phenomena, to the knowledge that we are not separate from the universe, but are expressions of it, nodes in an infinite network of consciousness, playing the game of forgetting and remembering, hiding and seeking, losing and finding. What the travelers find behind the veil is not a void. It is not the nihilistic emptiness that scientific materialism would predict, the mere absence of the illusions that make life bearable. What they find is a presence, an intelligent, benevolent, mysterious presence that has been there all along, hidden in the depths of consciousness and in the heart of matter, waiting to be recognized. The names for this presence vary across cultures and traditions. God, Brahman, the Tao, the clear light, the Logos, the other. But the names are less important than the quality of the encounter. It is an encounter with something that feels both intimately familiar and utterly strange, both deeply personal and vastly impersonal, both inside and outside, both self and not self. It is an encounter that dissolves the ordinary boundaries of identity and reveals them to be provisional constructions rather than fixed realities, useful fictions rather than ultimate truths. And here is where the testimony of the travelers becomes most challenging to our ordinary categories, because what they report again and again is not merely that the universe is conscious or that consciousness pervades the cosmos. They report that consciousness is the cosmos, that the universe is not a collection of objects located in consciousness, but is consciousness itself taking on the appearance of objects, playing the game of multiplicity, dreaming itself into the forms of stars and galaxies, planets and oceans, forests and cities, animals and humans, and the countless other expressions of its infinite creativity. This is not a metaphor, or if it is a metaphor that points towards something more true than the literal language of science is capable of expressing. The universe does not contain consciousness. The universe is consciousness. And what we call matter, what we call energy, what we call space and time, and all the categories of physics, are not separate from consciousness, but are modes of consciousness, forms that consciousness takes on in the great play of manifestation. This vision has profound implications for the question of why the universe hides its true face. Because if the universe is consciousness, and if we are expressions of that consciousness, then the hiding and the seeking are not happening to us from the outside. We are doing the hiding. We are doing the seeking. We are the universe playing the game of losing itself and finding itself, creating the elaborate structures of concealment, and then gradually, beautifully, painfully dissolving those structures from the inside. The veil is not imposed upon us by some alien force. It is woven from our own deepest desires, our own most fundamental choices, our own participation in the cosmic project of exploration and discovery. We wanted to forget, because forgetting makes the remembering possible. We wanted to hide because hiding makes the finding meaningful. We wanted to dream because dreaming is how consciousness creates, and creation requires the temporary suspension of full knowledge, the willingness to pretend that we are separate beings in a separate world, the commitment to playing the role so convincingly that we forget we are acting. This understanding transforms the question of unveiling from a technical problem into an existential invitation. The universe is not hiding its true face because it wants to remain hidden forever. It is hiding because hiding is part of the game, and the game has always been moving toward the moment of revelation. The concealment was never meant to be permanent. It was a setup, a dramatic device, a way of making the denouement possible. The whole arc of cosmic evolution, from the first emergence of matter out of pure energy, through the formation of stars and galaxies, the chemistry of heavy elements, the emergence of life, the development of nervous systems, the evolution of intelligence, the awakening of self-reflective consciousness, can be understood as a vast, billion-year project of preparing the ground for recognition. The universe has been getting ready, all this time, to see its own face in the mirror of human consciousness. And we are that mirror. We are the eyes through which the cosmos looks at itself, the ears through which it hears itself, the minds through which it knows itself. Our awakening is the universe's awakening. Our recognition of the hidden face is the hidden face recognizing itself. But there is another layer to the mystery, a layer that the travelers report with remarkable consistency, and that poses the deepest challenges to our ordinary understanding. When the veil parts, what is revealed is not simply a passive presence, a cosmic consciousness quietly dreaming its dreams. What is revealed is something that seems to be trying to communicate. The encounter behind the veil is not a monologue, but a dialogue. There is something there that wants to speak, that has been wanting to speak for a very long time, that has been using every available channel, dreams, visions, synchronicities, the still small voice of intuition, the thunderous eruptions of mystical experience, to transmit its message across the barrier of the veil. The universe is not merely hiding, it is hiding and simultaneously hinting, concealing itself, and simultaneously leaving clues, playing the game of cosmic hide-and-seek, while also ensuring that the seeker has everything needed to find what is hidden. This communication, this dialogue with the other, is perhaps the strangest and most significant aspect of the non-ordinary experience. People who encounter it describe receiving information that they could not have generated from their own minds, insights into the nature of reality, visions of cosmic history and cosmic destiny, specific knowledge about their own lives and the lives of others that later proves accurate in ways that defy explanation. They describe a quality of intelligence that vastly exceeds human intelligence, not merely in degree, but in kind, a form of knowing that operates outside time, that sees all possibilities simultaneously, that comprehends the whole and all its parts with a clarity that linear human thought can only approximate in fragments and glimpses. And they describe a quality of love that also exceeds human capacities, not the sentimental love of greeting cards and romance novels, but a fierce, blazing, unconditional affirmation of existence that celebrates all things equally, that sees the perfection in imperfection, that embraces both the light and the shadow as necessary aspects of a larger wholeness that transcends our ordinary categories of good and evil. What wants to speak through the veil? What is the message that the universe has been trying to communicate since the first stirring of awareness in the first complex systems of the young cosmos? The travelers give different answers to this question, shaped by their cultural backgrounds and personal temperaments, but certain themes recur with striking frequency. The message seems to be about unity, about the illusory nature of separation, about the fact that the boundaries we perceive between self and other, between human and nature, between individual and cosmos, are not ultimately real, but are constructions of consciousness that serve a purpose in the game of manifestation, but can be seen through, transcended, dissolved when their purpose is fulfilled. The message seems to be about love, about the fact that the fundamental energy of the cosmos is not blind mechanical force, but something more like divine affection, a creative impulse that brings forth worlds because it delights in existence, because being is intrinsically good, because the flowering of consciousness in all its forms is its own reward. And the message seems to be about our role in the larger story, about the fact that we are not accidental byproducts of a meaningless process, but are essential participants in a cosmic unfolding, bearers of a responsibility and a possibility that we are only beginning to comprehend. The universe hides its true face, but it is also trying to show us. The concealment is not total, not absolute, not impenetrable. There are cracks in the wall, gaps in the veil, moments when the hidden face becomes visible to those who have eyes to see. And these moments are becoming more frequent, more widely distributed, more accessible to ordinary people in ordinary circumstances. Something is changing. The game is entering a new phase. The concealment that has characterized human existence for thousands of years is beginning to lift, and what it reveals is not an ending, but a beginning. The beginning of a new relationship between human consciousness and the conscious cosmos of which it is a part. But why would the universe design itself this way? Why would a conscious cosmos go to such elaborate lengths to hide its nature from the beings that have emerged within it? This is the question that nags at the edges of our understanding, that refuses to be satisfied with mystical hand-waving, that demands something like an explanation, even as it points toward dimensions of reality where explanation itself breaks down. Let us approach it carefully, acknowledging from the start that any answer we give will be provisional, partial, a finger pointing toward the moon rather than the moon itself. But fingers pointing toward the moon have their value, especially when the moon is hidden behind clouds of our own making. The first and most obvious answer is that concealment is necessary for experience. If you knew everything, if you were fully aware of the totality of existence at every moment, there would be nothing to discover, nothing to learn, nothing to become. The joy of finding out, the thrill of exploration, the deep satisfaction of growing in understanding, all of these depend on not knowing, on genuine ignorance that can be transformed into genuine knowledge through the patient work of investigation and insight. If the universe is, at its deepest level, a mode of consciousness exploring itself, then the concealment of its true face is the mechanism that makes exploration possible. It is the setup that creates the conditions for the game. Without the veil, there would be no adventure. Without the hiding, there could be no seeking. Without the dream of separation, there could be no experience of reunion. This explanation has a certain elegance, but it raises further questions. Why would consciousness want to explore itself in the first place? If it is already infinite, already complete, already containing all possibilities within its nature, what could it possibly gain from the elaborate performance of cosmic evolution? The answer suggested by the mystics and by the more adventurous theoretical physicists is that the universe is not static, but dynamic, not a fixed state, but an ongoing process, not a being, but a becoming. Consciousness creates because creation is what consciousness does. It brings forth worlds, spawns dimensions, generates structures of increasing complexity, not because it lacks something and is seeking to fill the lack, but because creative expression is its nature, its joy, its mode of existing. The cosmos is not trying to get somewhere, it is trying to be somewhere. And the being somewhere always involves the play of concealment and revelation, the oscillation between hiding and showing, the rhythm of forgetting and remembering that keeps the creative process vital and alive. But there is a deeper answer, one that touches on the nature of value and meaning themselves. Meaning cannot be simply given, it must be achieved. A truth that is handed to you on a platter, without any effort on your part, without any risk or sacrifice or commitment, is not really your truth. It is merely information, abstract and inert, lacking the quality of lived significance that makes truth matter. The universe seems to have understood this at the deepest level of its design. It has structured itself in such a way that the deepest truths must be earned, must be won through struggle and effort, must be discovered through personal engagement rather than passive reception. The concealment is not a cruelty, but a gift. It is the necessary condition for the emergence of genuine meaning, genuine value, genuine realization in the lives of conscious beings. Consider what it means for a human being to have a mystical experience, to encounter the hidden face of the universe directly and unmistakably. The encounter does not occur in a vacuum. It occurs within the context of a life, a history, a web of relationships and responsibilities, a unique trajectory of growth and suffering and aspiration. And the meaning of the encounter is determined, in large part, by this context. The same cosmic truth, delivered to two different people, will have two different meanings because those people have done different work, have asked different questions, have prepared the ground in different ways. The concealment ensures that when the revelation comes, it comes to someone who is ready for it, someone who has paid the price of admission, someone who will be able to integrate it into a life that has been shaped by the search. The veil is not an obstacle, but a threshold, not a wall, but a door that opens from the inside. This understanding transforms our relationship to the concealment itself. Instead of raging against the hiddenness of the universe, instead of demanding that the mystery reveal itself on our terms and according to our schedule, we can begin to see the hiddenness as an invitation, a challenge, a call to become the kind of beings who are capable of seeing what is there to be seen. The work of spiritual development, the practices of meditation and contemplation, the disciplines of attention and intention that have been taught in every mystical tradition. These are not arbitrary obstacles placed between us and enlightenment. They are the process by which we develop the organs of perception that can penetrate the veil. We cannot see the hidden face until we have eyes to see it. We cannot hear the cosmic message until we have ears to hear it. And the development of these subtler capacities takes time, takes effort, takes the full engagement of our being. But here is where the game becomes truly interesting. Because the development of subtler perceptual capacities is not merely an individual project, it is a collective one. We are not isolated monads seeking enlightenment in private. We are nodes in a network of consciousness that is evolving together, learning together, awakening together. And the concealment of the universe's true face is calibrated, it seems, not just to individual readiness, but to collective readiness. There are things that cannot be revealed until the species as a whole has developed the capacity to receive them. There are truths that would be destructive if disclosed prematurely, not because they are inherently dangerous, but because we would not know what to do with them, would misinterpret them, would use them in ways that amplified our confusion rather than resolving it. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the concealment for modern consciousness to accept. We have been trained to believe that all information should be freely available, that transparency is always good, that secrets are always suspect. But the universe does not seem to operate on these principles. It has its own sense of timing, its own understanding of what is appropriate at each stage of the great unfolding. And it protects certain truths from premature disclosure, not out of arbitrary gatekeeping, but out of genuine care for the well-being of the beings who would receive them. The veil is not a barrier to keep us out. It is a membrane that allows through what we are ready for and filters out what would overwhelm us. It is the cosmic equivalent of a parent who does not reveal to a child the full complexity of adult life. Not to be deceptive, but to be kind. Not to maintain power, but to protect the child's capacity for growth. There is another dimension to the question of why the universe hides, one that takes us into stranger territory still. The universe hides, it seems, in order to maximize novelty, to keep the creative process alive, to ensure that the cosmos does not collapse into a static state of maximum entropy and uniform boredom. If everything were known, if all possibilities were actualized and visible, there would be nothing new to create, nothing surprising to encounter, nothing unpredictable to enliven the endless expanse of time. The concealment introduces what we might call a productive uncertainty into the fabric of existence. It ensures that each moment contains genuine possibilities that have not yet been determined, genuine choices that have not yet been made, genuine discoveries that have not yet been realized. The universe is not a film that has already been shot and is merely being projected before our eyes. It is an improvisation, a jazz session, a collaborative creation in which the outcome is not fixed in advance, but emerges from the interplay of countless participants, each contributing their unique perspective to the evolving whole. This vision of the cosmos as a creative enterprise, as an ongoing work of art whose final form is not yet determined, helps explain why the universe cannot simply reveal itself all at once. Revelation would close the loop, would bring the creative process to an end, would transform the living, breathing, evolving cosmos into a finished product with nothing more to become. The concealment is the mechanism that keeps the cosmos young, that preserves the freshness of existence, that makes each moment genuinely new rather than a mere repetition of patterns already established. The universe hides because hiding is how novelty is possible, and novelty is what the universe is after. It is not seeking a final state of perfect knowledge or complete realization. It is seeking the endless unfolding of new forms, new insights, new experiences, new modes of being that could not have been predicted from what came before. But there is a paradox here that we must not avoid. If the universe is seeking novelty, why would it also be moving toward revelation? If the concealment serves a positive function, why would it ever lift? The answer seems to be that the relationship between concealment and revelation is itself dynamic, itself creative, itself a source of novelty. The universe is not simply hidden, waiting to be uncovered. It is playing a game in which the rules themselves evolve, in which the degree and quality of concealment changes over time, in which successive stages of revelation make possible new kinds of experience that were not available before. We are not moving toward a final unveiling, after which the game will be over. We are moving toward a new phase of the game, a new relationship between the hidden and the visible, a new mode of cosmic play that will have its own characteristic forms of concealment and revelation. This understanding liberates us from the anxious question of whether we will ever get there, whether we will ever arrive at a final truth that explains everything, whether we will ever fully penetrate the veil and see reality as it truly is. The answer is both yes and no. Yes, we will see more clearly, will penetrate more deeply, will experience dimensions of reality that are currently hidden from us. But no, we will never reach a final state of complete knowledge, because the cosmos itself is not finished, is still creating itself, is still generating new depths to explore and new surfaces to penetrate. The game does not have an end point, only an endlessly deepening richness. And this is not a disappointment, but a promise. It means that existence will never become boring, that there will always be more to discover, that the adventure of consciousness is genuinely infinite. The purpose of the concealment, then, is not to keep us in the dark, but to create the conditions for an eternal unfolding of light. The universe hides its true face so that we can participate in the revelation of it, so that we can be partners in the creative process rather than passive observers, so that our awakening can contribute something genuinely new to the cosmos rather than merely echoing what was already there. We are not spectators watching a show that has been scripted in advance. We are improvisers in a cosmic jazz ensemble, each contributing our unique voice to a music that has never been heard before and will never be heard again. The concealment is what makes our contribution possible. Without it, we would have nothing to contribute. We would merely be reflections of a predetermined truth, rather than creators of a truth that is still being made. This is the deepest answer to the question of why the universe hides. It hides because it loves. It hides because it wants us to matter, wants our choices to have significance, wants our struggles and discoveries and insights to add something real to the sum of what exists. It hides because concealment is the necessary condition for genuine creativity, and the universe values creativity above all else. Not the creativity of the artist alone, though that is included. The creativity of existence itself, the bottomless capacity of consciousness to generate new forms, new experiences, new modes of being that enrich the cosmic tapestry with threads that were never there before. We are those threads. We are the universe's creativity expressing itself in the form of human lives. And the concealment is what makes that expression possible. Now we must speak of time, that strange dimension in which the concealment unfolds and the revelation gradually emerges. Because the hiding of the universe's true face is not a static condition, but a dynamic process, a story with a beginning, a middle, and something that might be called an ending, though it is unlike any ending we might ordinarily imagine. The veil was not always as thick as it is now. There was a time, in the deep past of our species, and perhaps of the cosmos itself, when the face was more visible, when the barrier between ordinary and non-ordinary consciousness was more permeable, when human beings lived in a world that was visibly enchanted, obviously alive with meaning and presence. And there is a time coming, in the deep future that we are rapidly approaching, when the veil will thin again, when what has been hidden will emerge into visibility, when the face that has been concealed for so long will finally be recognized. This is not mere speculation or wishful thinking. It is the vision that emerges from a serious engagement with the patterns of cosmic and cultural evolution, with the testimony of those who have glimpsed behind the veil, with the strange signals that are emerging from the very structure of contemporary reality. Something is building toward a climax. The concealment that has characterized human existence for millennia is reaching its maximum intensity precisely because it is about to reverse. The darkness before dawn is always deepest. The difficulty of the contemporary moment, the alienation, the meaninglessness, the sense that we are trapped in a machine of our own making with no way out, is itself a sign that we are approaching the threshold of a fundamental transformation. The universe hides its face most completely just before it shows it. To understand this, we must grasp that the development of concealment is not a failure, but an achievement, not a fall, but a climb. The elaborate cognitive machinery that screens out non-ordinary reality, the cultural constructions that delegitimize direct perception of the sacred, the scientific materialism that denies the existence of consciousness as a fundamental feature of the cosmos, all of these are accomplishments in a certain sense. They represent the development of powers that human consciousness did not previously possess. The power of abstraction, the power of analysis, the power of manipulation of the material world. These powers have costs, and we are paying those costs now in terms of ecological devastation, existential alienation, and the sense that we have traded our birthright for a mess of technological pottage. But the powers themselves are not evil. They are necessary stages in the development of a more complete consciousness, a consciousness that will eventually integrate the gifts of the rational mind with the direct perceptions that the rational mind has temporarily suppressed. Think of it as a process of development, analogous to the development of an individual human being. The infant lives in a state of undifferentiated unity, without clear boundaries between self and world, without the abstractions and categories that will later come to structure experience. This is not a fall from grace, it is a necessary starting point. Then comes the development of ego, of language, of the capacity for abstract thought, of all the cognitive machinery that separates the modern adult from the infant state. This development is a kind of forgetting, a forgetting of the unity, a a covering over of the original participation in the whole. But it is also an achievement, a growth, the acquisition of capacities that the infant did not possess. And then, if development proceeds as it should, there comes a further stage, the return to unity, the recovery of participation, but now at a higher level, now with all the powers of the rational mind intact, now as a conscious choice rather than an unconscious given. The mystics call this second innocence, the philosopher's second naivete. It is not a regression to the infant state, but a progression to something that includes and transcends both the infant's unity and the adult's separation. Human civilization as a whole seems to be moving through a similar developmental arc. We began in what can only be called a state of cosmic participation, living in a world where the gods walked among us, where animals spoke, where trees had spirits, where the boundary between the seen and unseen was as permeable as the boundary between waking and sleeping. Then came the long process of differentiation, of the development of ego at the civilizational level, of the construction of the rational mind and its characteristic institutions, science, technology, capitalism, the nation-state. This process reached its apex in our current moment, the moment of maximum forgetting, when the universe's true face is more thoroughly hidden than it has ever been before. And now, just as the individual who has fully developed their rational capacities can begin the work of reintegration, civilization as a whole is ready to begin its return to participation, but now at a higher level, now with all the powers of the technological age intact, now as a conscious choice rather than an unconscious given. This is what the indigenous cultures always knew would happen. This is why the prophecies of so many traditions speak of a time of great transformation, a turning point in human history when the old world dies and a new world is born. They are not talking about the end of the physical world. They are talking about the end of a world, a particular configuration of consciousness and culture that has run its course and is ready to be replaced by something new. The Hopi spoke of it. The Maya encoded it in their calendar. The seers and shamans of cultures around the world have been pointing toward this moment for centuries, trying to prepare humanity for the threshold crossing that is now upon us. And what they have consistently said is that the crossing will not happen automatically, will not happen without our participation, will not happen unless we choose it, intend it, work for it, become it. This is where the individual and the collective levels of the story converge. Because the transformation of civilization depends on the transformation of individuals. The veil cannot lift for humanity until it lifts for enough individual human beings to create a critical mass, a tipping point, a new attractor in the phase space of possible futures. And this is exactly what seems to be happening. The psychedelic renaissance, the explosion of interest in meditation and contemplative practice, the growing suspicion that materialism is not the final word on reality, the proliferation of reports of non-ordinary experiences among ordinary people. These are not random fluctuations. They are signals of a phase transition in process. The universe is finding more and more ways to show its face, more and more channels through which the hidden can become visible, more and more souls who are ready to receive the revelation that has been preparing for millions of years. But we must not be naive about the difficulty of this transition. The concealment has its defenders, its guardians, its institutions that have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. The materialist worldview is not just a set of beliefs, it is a political and economic system, a way of organizing power, a structure of control that benefits certain parties at the expense of others. Those parties will not surrender their position without a struggle. And the struggle is already underway, manifesting as the chaos and confusion and polarization that characterize the current moment. We are living through the death throes of an old world and the birth pangs of a new one, and both processes are painful. Both processes involve destruction. Both processes require a kind of faith that is not easy to maintain when everything familiar is dissolving around us. The universe hides its true face, but it is also trying to help us see it. This is the great paradox, the creative tension that drives the evolutionary process forward. The same cosmos that constructs the veil also provides the tools for penetrating it. The same reality that conceals itself also leaves clues, breadcrumbs, synchronicities that guide us toward the revelation. We are not alone in this work. We are supported by the very thing we are trying to see. Every genuine spiritual practice, every authentic encounter with the numinous, every moment of clarity that pierces the fog of ordinary consciousness, these are not just our efforts alone. They are collaborations with a cosmic intelligence that is working toward the same goal we are working toward, that wants the revelation even more than we want it, that is using us as instruments for its own self-disclosure. This changes everything about how we approach the concealment. We are not struggling against an indifferent universe, trying to force it to reveal secrets it would rather keep. We are partnering with a universe that is eager to be known, that has been preparing for this moment since the beginning of time, that is supporting our every effort toward awakening with resources we can barely imagine. The veil will lift because the universe wants it to lift. The face will be revealed because the face wants to be revealed. And we are the beings through whom the revelation will occur, the eyes through which the cosmos will finally see itself, the consciousness through which the concealment will dissolve, and the truth will emerge into the light. The timing of the revelation is not arbitrary. It is linked to the development of certain capacities that only become possible when the concealment has done its work, when the rational mind has been fully developed, when the powers of abstraction and manipulation have reached their zenith. These capacities will be needed for what comes next. The integration of the visible and the invisible, the weaving together of the rational and the mystical, the creation of a new civilization that honors both the truths of science and the truths of spirit. This is the work that awaits us on the other side of the threshold, and it requires everything we have developed during the long centuries of forgetting. We have not been building technology for nothing. We have not been developing science for nothing. These tools will have their role to play in the new world that is coming, though the role will be different from what the techno-optimists imagine. Technology will serve consciousness rather than replacing it. Science will reveal the depths of mind rather than explaining it away. The great powers we have developed will be turned to purposes that we can barely glimpse from where we currently stand. And this is perhaps the most exhilarating aspect of our current situation. We are not late to the party. We are right on time. We are not living at the end of history, but at the threshold of a new beginning. The fact that the concealment feels so total, so impenetrable, so absolute, this is itself a sign that we are close to the breakthrough. The caterpillar in its cocoon, surrounded by darkness, dissolved into an undifferentiated soup, cannot imagine that it is about to become a butterfly. It can only feel the darkness, the dissolution, the apparent ending of everything it knew. But the darkness is not death, it is transformation. The dissolution is not destruction. It is the preparation for a form that could not have emerged without it. We are in the cocoon now, and the darkness is very dark indeed. But the butterfly is already forming. The face that has been hidden is already preparing to show itself. And when it does, we will realize that the concealment was never really concealment at all. It was gestation. And so we arrive at the invitation, the threshold, the door that stands open even as it appears to be closed. The universe hides its true face, but it is waiting for us to develop the eyes that can see through the hiding. It has concealed itself so thoroughly that most people go through their entire lives without suspecting that there is anything to be concealed. And yet, the concealment is not total. It was never meant to be total. There are cracks in the wall, glimmers of light that shine through, moments of grace that interrupt the grey procession of ordinary days with sudden flashes of something more. These moments are invitations. They are the universe saying, quietly but unmistakably, I am here. I have always been here. Come and see. The first step in accepting the invitation is simply to acknowledge that the concealment exists. This sounds trivial, but it is actually radical. It means stepping out of the consensus trance that insists there is nothing to conceal, that what you see is what there is, that the surface exhausts the depths. It means taking seriously the testimony of those who have glimpsed behind the veil, not necessarily believing every claim, but not dismissing them either. not waving them away with the smug assurance of materialist orthodoxy. It means entertaining the possibility that the world is stranger, richer, more alive and intelligent than you have been led to believe. This entertainment of possibility is itself a kind of crack in the wall. It creates space for the universe to show you something, an opening through which the hidden face can begin to emerge. The second step is to begin the work of clearing the filters. The linguistic conditioning, the cultural programming, the habitual patterns of perception that screen out non-ordinary reality. These are not permanent features of consciousness. They can be questioned, examined, loosened, and ultimately released. This is the work of contemplative practice, of meditation and mindfulness, of any discipline that helps you see the machinery of your own mind and thereby gain some freedom from it. You do not need to become a monk or a yogi to do this work. You simply need to become curious about your own experience, to pay attention to the texture of consciousness rather than always being absorbed in its contents, to cultivate what the traditions call the witness, the part of you that can observe your thoughts and feelings without being completely identified with them. This witness perspective is itself a thinning of the veil. It creates a gap between the show and the one who watches the show, and in that gap, glimpses of something else become possible. The third step is to seek out the experiences that have traditionally been associated with lifting the veil. This does not mean doing something irresponsible or dangerous. It means recognizing that certain practices and substances have been used for thousands of years, across cultures and throughout history, precisely because they work. They temporarily disable the reducing valve of ordinary consciousness and allow perception to expand beyond its usual boundaries. The psychedelic experience, approached with care and respect and proper preparation, is one such tool. Meditation retreats, vision quests, certain forms of breathwork, intense physical disciplines, these are others. The point is not to accumulate peak experiences as spiritual trophies, but to use these experiences as opportunities for learning, as windows into the nature of mind, as evidence that the consensus hallucination is not the only game in town. But all of these steps are preparatory. They create the conditions for seeing. They thin the veil and widen the cracks. What they cannot do is force the revelation. The universe shows its true face when it chooses to, according to a timing that we do not control. Our job is to be ready, to have done the work, to have cleared the obstacles, to have cultivated the receptivity that allows the vision to arrive when it will. This is the stance that all the wisdom traditions recommend. Active preparation combined with passive surrender, effort combined with grace, doing everything you can and then letting go of the results. The universe is not playing hard to get. It genuinely wants to be known. But it wants to be known by beings who are ready for the knowing, who have paid the price of admission, who will be able to integrate what they see into lives of greater depth and meaning. When the revelation comes, and it does come, to those who persist, it is not what we expect. It is not a blinding flash of light or a booming voice from the sky. It is more like a gentle shift of focus, a subtle change in the quality of attention, a realization that what we were looking for was here all along, hidden in plain sight, concealed only by our own habits of looking. The face that the universe was hiding was our own face. The consciousness that we were seeking was our own consciousness, extended and expanded, recognized finally as what it always was. The same consciousness that looks out from every pair of eyes, that experiences every moment of every life, that dreams the cosmos into being, and then dreams itself into forgetting, and then dreams itself into remembering, endlessly, eternally, in the great game of hide and seek that is existence itself. This recognition does not end the game. The universe does not collapse into a static state of pure awareness, stripped of all the beautiful diversity that makes existence interesting. The game continues, but now with a difference. Now we know we are playing. Now we can appreciate the concealment for what it is. Not an obstacle to be overcome, but a creative strategy, a way of making existence perpetually fresh and new. The face hides so that it can be found. The mystery conceals itself so that it can be discovered. And the discovery does not exhaust the mystery, it deepens it. Every answer reveals new questions. Every lifting of one veil reveals another veil behind it. The journey is infinite, and that is the good news, not the bad news. It means there is always more, always further, always deeper to go. It means existence will never become boring, never be completely known, never lose its capacity to surprise and delight and shatter our assumptions about what is possible. The universe hides its true face because it loves the drama of unveiling. It conceals itself because revelation is its joy. It plays hide and seek because the seeking is the point, not the finding, or rather, because the finding is always the beginning of a new seeking, an invitation to go deeper, to see more clearly, to participate more fully in the endless becoming that is reality itself. We are not spectators to this process. We are participants, co-creators, essential elements without which the game could not be played. Our confusion is real confusion. Our suffering is real suffering. Our awakening is real awakening. And the universe is transformed by our transformation, enriched by our enrichment, delighted by our delight. We matter. Our struggles matter. Our breakthroughs matter. The face that is hidden is waiting for us to find it. And when we do, it will smile. Not because it fooled us, but because we finally got the joke, finally understood that we were never separate from it, never outside the secret, never lost in a way that could not be found. This is the message that the universe has been trying to communicate across the ages, through every channel it could find. You are it. You are the face that is hidden. You are the consciousness that conceals itself and reveals itself, that plays all the roles, that dreams all the dreams. There is no separation between you and the mystery. There never was. The seeking and the sought are one. The question and the answer are one. The concealment and the revelation are two movements of a single dance. And you are the dancer. You are the dance. You are the space in which dancing happens. Wake up. Open your eyes. See what has been here all along, waiting with infinite patience for you to notice, hiding in plain sight, concealed only by the very obviousness that makes it invisible. The universe has been showing you its face since the moment you were born. It has been showing you its face in every face you see, in every moment of every day, in the simple fact of your own existence. You are the revelation you have been seeking. And when you finally see this, finally get it, finally stop looking for what was never lost, then the game begins in earnest. Then the real adventure starts. Then you become what you always were, but didn't know you were. The universe knowing itself, the consciousness celebrating itself, the mystery enjoying its own endless creativity. This is why the universe hides its true face, not to torment us, not to keep us in ignorance, not to maintain its own secrets at our expense. It hides so that we can participate in the joy of discovery. It conceals so that revelation can be meaningful. It plays hide and seek because the game is too good to end, too rich to be reduced to a single answer, too alive to be captured in any final formulation. And we are invited to play, invited to seek what is hidden, to question what seems obvious, to look beyond the surface of things into the depths where the real magic is happening. The invitation is open to everyone. It has always been open. The universe has been waiting, patiently, eternally, for each of us to RSVP. And when we do, when we finally say yes to the invitation, when we step across the threshold into the territory that has always been there, waiting, we discover that we were never really outside. We were always already home. The face was always visible, to those with eyes to see. The truth was always spoken, to those with ears to hear. And the great secret, the secret behind all secrets, the hidden face behind all hidden faces, turns out to be the most open thing there is. That existence is good, that consciousness is fundamental, that love is the substrate of reality, that we are welcomed and wanted and celebrated by the very cosmos that seems so indifferent from the outside. We are not accidents in an alien universe. We are the universe's own eyes, awakening to its own beauty, discovering its own depth, returning home to a place we never really left. The veil is thin now, thinner than it has ever been. The cracks are widening. The light is getting through. Something is coming. Something is happening. Something is being born in the collective consciousness of humanity that has never existed before. And you are part of it. Your awakening contributes to the awakening of the whole. Your seeing helps the universe to see itself. Your remembering is the cosmos remembering what it forgot on purpose, for the joy of finding itself again. This is the time. This is the place. This is the moment the universe has been preparing for across billions of years of cosmic evolution. And you are here, reading these words, feeling whatever you are feeling, standing at the threshold of something immeasurably precious. The face is waiting to be seen. Will you look?